Hey everybody, it's Ken again. And so I'm going to walk through these 3 steps to financial freedom, and hopefully you'll learn a bit about it. But this is exactly what I did over 20 years ago when I was trying to figure out, how do I get out of this rat race? How do I figure out my own cash in order to get out of this rat race and to be able to provide for myself so I don't have an issue like a lot of people are going through today. And hopefully a lot of people will watch and they'll do this and they can figure it out on their own as well. And we all create our own journeys, guys. So the first thing is you need to figure out what your number is. And so what I mean by that is, you know, let's say that your expenses are $3,000 a month. Now, maybe they're 2, maybe they're 1, maybe they're 5. It doesn't really matter. But you have to figure this out. You have to go really calculate how much you're paying for your car or for transportation, how much you're paying for rent or your mortgage. Maybe you have some kids. Well, how much do they cost? In my particular case, that's a big number. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that you have to figure out and add all that up, you know, for travel or for food or all those kinds of things. You know, and you really need to get really detailed on this, because if you don't know your monthly operating expenses, or what I call your burn rate, then you're in trouble. And that's the basis for all of this. And so what you want to do in order to get financial freedom, just think about how easy this can be. How can we create $3,000 of passive income for you to be financially free? That's exactly what we want here. In other words, well, the reason we want that is because we want to be able to not have to worry about that. In other words, how do you create cash flowing deals to cover your operating expenses? At that point, you're financially free. For example, right now we have about 8,000 tenants all paying us rent, but we had, as a company, $1.5 million a month coming out of these deals for all of our projects. Okay, so obviously it's plenty of money to, you know, to do whatever, and a lot of it goes to investors and all that kind of stuff, and that's all super complicated, and we get into a lot more detail on that at kenmcelroy.com. So the cash flowing deals is 3,000. So here's the key. What you want here is we want to find deals. Let's say you find a house that cash flows $500 a month, okay? Because it's not always going to be like that. Sometimes it'll be $300, sometimes it'll be $400. I know people that are doing $800, $900, $1,000 a month, okay? It just depends on how you buy and your operating expenses and how much the rent is. So my sister, as an example, she took a 5-bedroom house and she rents out the individual rooms, and she has one house that produces about $900 a month in cash flow. So you can get there all kinds of ways, and this is all about education. So, but the point is let's just say that these are at about $500 a month. Okay? Now, lots of management, lots of learning about, you know, how to rent to a tenant, how to set up a lease, how to manage that tenant. You know, there's a ton of work here, don't get me wrong. But the goal is, how do we cover your operating expenses? So if we can find 6 deals, only 6, in let's say a 3-year period, you only have to buy 2 a year. You can do this while you're working. Then you've now gotten your $3,000 a month. That $3,000 a month has covered your operating expenses. And now the goal for you becomes, how do you manage these 6 houses? How do you manage these 6 tenants? Okay? And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. But the biggest problem most people have is the third thing, which is, how do you find the money? Okay? Everyone has that problem. Here's the thing that I want you to learn the most today. Most people don't have money. Okay? Most people are borrowing money from somebody in a form of what we call OPM from the bank. When you take a loan from a bank, that's actually somebody else's money. If you think about it, it's certainly not yours, and it's certainly not the bank's. It's actually the people that are depositing the money in the bank. Same thing on the equity. So finding the money, believe it or not, is not that difficult if you have the deal. If you have a great deal that produces $500 a month and you could walk it into somebody, or maybe it's $1,000 a month, cash flow, and you can say, listen, you give me the equity, I'll do all the work, and we'll split it. You get 500, I get 500. I'm telling you, there's investors for that stuff all day long. And this is what I like to call OPM, other people's money. And you can find that in the form of both debt and equity. Because at the end of the day, guys, let me tell you something. It's all just money. It's just called something different. This typically comes from high net worth people, and this typically comes from a bank, let's say. So finding the money, believe it or not, is difficult, but it's not that difficult. The harder part, it's finding these 6 deals. That's the hard part. And then having them cash flow 500 a month, that's the hard part. It's not actually the transaction. This part, believe it or not, there's banks that will loan on houses all day long because you know why? If you can't pay the payment, they get the house. So that's their collateral. And so getting the equity and debt together, believe it or not, is not all that difficult. The hardest part is actually finding the deal. So thank you for watching.